get the meeting going. Chris has other places to be too, so get moving for him. There may be pizza. There's pizza over there, so please help yourselves as you get a chance. Let's go around the table and have introductions, and we'll start with you, Chief.
Dennis LeBlanc, Cambridge Fire Chief.
Melinda Freeman, Department of Health and Human Services.
Nora Warframe's office.
Gary Donnelly, PD.
Jack Frost, Chief Code Enforcement.
Bill Evans, Assembly.
Tim Skeen.
Ukraine is not much.
Ellie Gray Johnson.
Ron Fish, Officer Emergency.
Forrest Dunbar, Assembly.
And since there's not that many people in the audience, why don't we just see who's on air?
Devin Kelly from ADM.
Josh Duran, Park Superintendent. John Ruther, Parks and Recreation Director.
Chris Schutte, Director of the Office of Economic and Community Development.
Seneca Nato, City Prosecutor.
Folks in the back.
Rusty, ASP.
Patrick Sack, ASD.
And still have an agenda. They're sitting on the back table there. I'd like to make a quick change to the stated agenda. And item number 3 under new business, I'd like to switch the order of the Town Square Park discussion and the Quake Brewing Company discussion. I don't believe the gentleman from Quake is here yet anyway, so that works out well. And Chris is here, so Chris, why don't you take it away? The topic is basically the efforts that are being made at Town Square Park.
Yeah, good morning, and thanks for letting us come down to address the Town Square Park process that's unfolding. As you saw earlier, we've got Josh and John here from Parks and Rec. We'll go into more specific details related to the construction schedule and timeline and impact to the central water fountain in the park. In a nutshell, what's happening is a 2-part process. The first part is the fountain is in dire need of basically complete repair and renovation and replacement. Many of you know it has not functioned very well over the past, 4 years now? And prior to that, there were a number of problems associated with it and with the plaza area adjacent to it with leaking water, et cetera. The analogy I like to use is that the fountain has cancer, and the only way to operate on that cancer is to take the fountain out and get a look at the insides. During that process, there will be some mitigation done by Parks and Rec so that the area remains accessible and safe and open. And John will go into more detail with that. And immediately following that, we will start the Town Square Park master planning process. Probably not until late August, early September because of summer schedules and challenges with scheduling. But it is envisioned that the Town Square Park will be redesigned through a public process that involves 2 primary groups of experts and citizen advisors, both of which will be project managed by Parks and Rec and other partners within the municipality. And those 2 groups, one will be a purely technical group made up of landscape architects, designers, the like, probably police or public safety specialists. And then there's a need for a lot of community involvement and buy-in, and so the Citizen Advisory Group, which will be the second part of that process, will also be formed to ensure that the community is brought along in the master plan process. The master plan process is a fairly long process because of not only the public meetings that will be held and all the public input that will be gathered, but also because of the regulatory requirements for how the redesigned plan is pushed forward in the community. So we'll have a future update on concrete timelines, on concrete process for this committee, probably later this summer if you have room in your schedule. But for the actual impending construction work, I'll hand it over to Parks and Rec staff.
And for you, Mr. Train, you got a question?
Chris, how are we funding this and how much is the cost going to be to remove?
Josh will speak to the costs of the abatement, and then the cost to redesign the park is unknown at this point because we don't know what the community wants out of that park.
As far as abatement, was that a bond package that was submitted?
Yeah.
How much was a lot of the bond package, do we know?
There's $100,000 was in the bond, had to do with irrigation, lighting, and any other work that was necessary to improve the safety of the park.
Irrigation networks are taking it out. Thanks, John.
So, anyway, to follow up what Chris has to say, I think everybody understands the magnitude of what we're dealing with. If not, all you have to do is show up early in the morning trips around Town Square Park is my preference. So I take a look at every imaginable angle, I point by Kobuk, I take a look at the insides, the outsides, et cetera. We have a substantial problem, as Chris calls, the fountain. The fountain is cancer. It has not functioned well. It's caused us a lot of grief. It's now just a haven for bad activity, and it needs to be removed. Josh has done a lot of work in preliminary design. We understand that taking the fountain out, of course, leads to other steps. Part of the other steps is we've got to save the water and electrical so that we have the capacity then for an irrigation system, which right now is designed to handle the north side. As Chris also said, the long-term plan is to have very open public process dialogue with a lot of buy-in from a lot of people, so that whatever ultimately the park is going to look like in the future, everybody's got an opportunity to weigh in, and there are substantially differing opinions as to what the park should or shouldn't look like ultimately. We will rely on information that came from the CAP team. You guys did a lot of work on that analysis, and we understand a lot of recommendations in there. As everybody knows, about 3 years ago, direction of the administration, we started limbing up some of the trees. That did not sit very well with some of the community members, and yet at the same time helped reestablish sightlines, which were extremely valuable and necessary for ABD when they do their drive-bys, et cetera, and also from the standpoint of people who are literally just coming around the block, walking through the park, staging across the street for tourist buses or whatever it might be. Unfortunately, the problem is bigger than that. The fountain, A, doesn't work, it needs to be brought out. We need to open up the entire area. As I mentioned in the meeting this morning, I do this on a regular basis, and I do it 7 days a week. As I drive around, take a look in the most current fashion to put it in perspective. And this morning was the least number of people in the park of the last 10 days. 8 were in the park, 2 were sleeping. The most I've seen in the last 10 days is 18 in the park and 11 sleeping. So yesterday morning was a really good example. There was a gentleman walking from the pack going from the South 6th, going to cut across the park going north of the 5th. There was a woman walking from near Penny's, because again I circle so I see the progress, walking, and she was going to go from the 5th Avenue side, go south and go through the park. I watched both these people at intermediate steps, both go to take the trail across, and both went towards the pack and went back out on the street and totally avoided the fountain area and the northeast corner. So it kind of speaks for itself as to what we're dealing with. It's not good, it's not healthy. What we deal with, Parks and Recreation, at 6 o'clock in the morning, we dispatch our crews. In various forms and fashion, that park can be one of the most disgusting places, minus, I'll call it a homeless camp, that you ever want to walk through. It's really become out of control. Part of the solution is getting rid of the fountain, creating an open space, bringing in more activities, more positive environment, but we're also needing ABD's assistance because at 11 o'clock at night to 6 o'clock in the morning is killing us. That's our biggest challenge. We have to get them out of there, otherwise they reside there and they deal with the first thing in the morning. And it's everything, I won't get into detail, but it's not good. But our staff is expected to go in and have it ready for the general public to access the park at 6 in the morning. We're very close to it, including the tourists. So we have a plan in place, and I'll just let Josh kind of describe the process for it.
So one thing to add to what Chris said is, with this master planning process, one thing that really needs to happen is we need to identify how we program the park, so we do ensure that we have positive activity in there. So in the master planning process, that would be a big effort. It won't just be speaking to the design, what things look like, but how does our department assure that we're having proper activities there? To get back to the fountain, from a tentative schedule right now, we're looking at demolition starting next Monday, the 6th. This is in order to accommodate current events that are planned. We're looking at about 3 to 6 days for demolition. Then after that, we currently have some preliminary ideas of what replaces the fountain, so we're just looking at something really simplistic so we don't do a disservice to how the park currently is intended to function and how it can intend to function when we do this 20-year vision of the park. So it'll probably just be a concrete plaza that could be activated with a vendor, it could be activated as a stage for events, and it will allow clear sight lines and will eliminate the hidden space that does exist there now.
Mr. Gray Jackson, you had a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just curious, can the concrete be recycled?
It can be. There is an entity in town that does take concrete, but from one thing that can be recycled and one thing that we have considered from like a reuse perspective is utilizing the structure of the current fountain to actually facilitate this new simplistic plaza that would replace the space.
Mr. Dunbar, your question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This question is going for John. My understanding is that the fountains were originally constructed based on $150,000 donated from the family, dedicated after the individual. My question was, has the family been consulted at all during this process leading up to demolition? Going forward.
We ourselves have not. Chris and
Yeah.
Suzanne have had some conversations with the Silver family.
Suzanne has, unfortunately, it's through a niece of, a niece of Eunice Silverer, who is the spouse of the gentleman for whom the fountain is named. In the short term, the plaque will be preserved and safe, and at some point will be either repurposed, I imagine, for recognition of the contribution in whatever form the park takes.
So we were unable to get a hold. Is she still living?
Eunice is, and she's unfortunately not, she suffers from Alzheimer's, so she's not very coherent. The niece of Eunice, was thankful for reaching out. The son, I believe, of Eunice and Robert, reached out to Suzanne, and unfortunately, because the time it took for that niece to contact him to contact us, he contacted us after the press announcement on Wednesday. So he said, "Oh, I read about it before I heard about it from my own family, but I recognize that the fountain needs to go."
So general people supportive of this change.
Yeah, and their concern is the same as I imagine yours is how will we continue to recognize this generous contribution, and that's why we're hoping to preserve the plaque and of course maybe have some sort of addition to it that recognizes that if the fountain is no longer there in the future, that there was a fountain here at one point, and it was through the generous donation of this family.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Strange?
Just a question for you on this advisory board. Are you planning on the staffing with what we normally do, our boards and commissions appointed by the mayor, confirmed by the assembly? Or are you suddenly going to appoint these people without any input from the assembly members?
We'd love assembly member input, and that would be part of the presentation back to this subcommittee later in the summer. Is once we have a list of either the participants or the types of participants we'd like to have on that both of those groups, we'd love to share it with you. And broadly speaking, the emphasis has been on longtime community supporters of the park, especially the people that have been that were instrumental in the creation of the park to begin with. The neighboring organizations and institutions, the neighboring community councils, as well as downtown community councils. So we're trying to capture the types of groups that would be most engaged and involved with the park.
Yeah, there are bricks over in the park still. Are they gonna be disturbed or, we don't know yet?
We
Till
don't
see
know.
design.
We don't know yet, and as
Now
part
we
of
do that, we lose some.
Yeah, as part of previous renovation projects in that park, the previous brick locations have been changed, bricks have been remade, etc. We're fortunate that Parks and Rec did a very comprehensive inventory of all of the bricks, locations, names, etc. So now at least we have an inventory of what's there, so should there be a need to move them, we'll know which ones were moved, who they belong to, etc.
Mr. Strange?
This Sunday bought one for Tom Fink, so please don't lose that one.
We'll start.
Sure.
We have have Josh go ahead and continue, because this, what he's just kind of led into is the first step, but it's also then a continuation for a couple of process.
Yeah, so after any demolition, we'd be looking at probably about 10 to 20 days for installation of concrete. After that, the park will be able to function a lot more as is. We won't have things blocked off as much, and then we'd be looking at about a week to install a permanent automatic irrigation system for the northern aspect of the park.
Recognize that, of course, Town Square Park is a hub of activity already, whether it's positive or negative, it's highly used. So the contractor also will have, if you will, a construction zone. And we have to make sure that we separate his activities, of course, from the general public, make sure it's protected, because we don't want to have any other issues. We also understand Downtown Partnership, of course, it's got events in there, we've got special events on top of that, whether it's Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, it's activity time in the city. So we're cognizant that we have to be very careful, but we also have to do workarounds without impacting people who already have permits and things like that. One of the reasons why we waited until next week to actually initiate action.
Questions? Mr.
Thank you,
Dennis?
Mr. Chairman, it just hit me. So how do you get the folks out of the park to do the demolition?
When you bring in a big excavator,
You know, because for a lot of reasons, you know, safety, you know, all of that.
There will be temporary fencing,
Okay.
so it'll identify the work zone.
Hopefully that works. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
it's gonna be important, I mean, it's already important, it's gonna be important, because once you start in a construction activity, you know, it's not a perfect science, it's what you have each day, leads to the next steps, et cetera. We will need APD's assistance to make sure, particularly in the evenings, and I think the SROs are there until 9 o'clock, is that the current plan?
Yes.
7 a.m. to 9 p.m., is that the range? So we're gonna have a margin at the end of the day, but it's gonna be important, because we don't wanna end up with other issues, you know, associated with what we're trying to accomplish, so, getting the people moved out of there is just another piece of what already exists.
Jim, you said you check out the park every morning. How long have you been doing that?
How long have we been back from City Hall? 7 years?
And
Whatever.
the current state of affairs that you described as being just really bad, when did you notice that begin?
If you go back, we haven't seen this kind of activity generally in the city as a whole. It's not just Town Square Park, we've had other discussions. We've got, again, part of what Nora's been doing, and Gary and others, putting together the mapping. You saw what, you know, we produced, and we're going another step with that. In fact, I think this afternoon we're going to look at that. So the increase in these kinds of activities has been gradual, but not overbearing. The last 2 years is when, whether it's weather conditions or whatever is going on, I don't have the answer for that, but in the last 2 years, we've seen a dramatic increase. We saw problems, the SROs have done a great job out in Downtown Partnership, you know, comes in and they kind of move people around, trying to take care of it. The last 2 years, is we've seen this spike, and now it's at proportions that need to be addressed. It needs to be addressed, but it just is bigger.
Mr. Steele?
You ran everybody out of the bus depot, I think. That's one of the reasons. But yeah,
Yeah. I don't have the answer, but I know that Linda and Nancy and others are working on lots of other programs and potential solutions. We're just trying to figure out how we can move this forward from our side, and then have others take results as well. The outcomes will take some time, but I think everybody working collaboratively, cooperatively, we are going to be bringing in new positions, start cleaning up some of the campsites, and turn that over to Linda, Nancy, and others to do their good work. Hopefully we start seeing a significant change between now and the middle of September.
with that, why don't we switch to the other part of this situation, and Deputy Chief Gilliam, representing Chief Tolly today, tell us
Yes.
what the APD's plans are for Township of Lawrence.
Certainly. Thank you for the opportunity to be here, and Chief Tully is out of state, so I'm glad to be here for him. The Town Square Park issue, John accurately depicted that there has been a spike in the last couple of years. The CAP team has reported back to us over the last several years. We believe, understand that some of these problems are because of the effectiveness in the camp postings of the illegal campers. When we started in 2011, we thought there was like 400 camps. The information we started receiving back was that the illegal campers were just going to wait us out. They thought it would be temporal, but because we had a commitment to the city to try to really take back our parks, there were several groups in the Midtown area, east and north, that were really concerned about park safety. So we diverted resources, a considerable amount of effort to try to keep those parks posted. Now, most of you are aware that the process requires us to post for 15 days. Over the course of these years, we saw the number of people visiting and staying in shelters increase, and VFS and others have reported they've been at capacity for a couple of years now, which we believe is an indication that more people are in the shelter areas, or they're flopping around the areas and then using the services available through Beans and VFS. So we started noticing this tendency, and the term they use is flopping. They're not really constructing a whole lot of tents, but they're staying in public places. There are some problems for us constitutionally. A lot of this behavior is actually constitutionally protected. It looks bad for people that are visiting, but as a police agency, we just can't walk in and tell you, you gotta get up and move. So if you look at DOJ and some of the community policing projects and recommendations, one of the things is that they recommend that you entice legitimate users that will help displace illegitimate users. I think there was some movement down that path in the last year or so of how we can incorporate some entities coming in and hosting parties or events in these public areas. It's a great tactic. It's a good strategy to use. I don't know how far we've gotten with some of those. I think there was even something that's coming up for this summer. All good methods to use. The problem for us, of course, is staffing. Whatever we do, we're going to have to divert resources. The 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. Will be easier to do because we do have downtown officers. The problem is if it's going to be on a Friday or Saturday night, we typically are call to call until 4 a.m. So we could get into the areas very early in the morning to try to impact your 6 a.m. operations. The possibility, right now we're going to have SROs. We're having to divide them up into 3 sections. A third of them have to deal with the summer schools that are going on. A third are helping with training our new recruits. And then finally, we've got a third that are going to work the downtown project area. A third of the SROs means 3 or 4. And so we've got limited. So what we're going to try to do is divert some additional in-between calls for service patrol to assist with the SROs. And then finally is we may have to divert the CAP back in to help, especially with some of the CEPTED principles. So we will support it, and we'll do what we can to make sure that you have the ability to do the construction and the work that's necessary.
Questions for the chief?
Maybe to add one other comment, I'm glad Sam is here as well. We've had this discussions as well about possibly in the future working towards not enforcement of Parks and Recreation, but what would you? Citing ability, I think is the term. If that would give us maybe one more tool so that minus APD being available, should we engage with people, we would have the ability to cite individuals or create a citation, which then goes to APD follow because they're the enforcement side. We talked about the mechanics of some of these things, and it's not finalized, but we continue to kind of have this, I guess, progress towards, and it doesn't apply just to Town Square Park. It applies very broadly to vandalism, to trash, to dumping. It's broad spectrum. And I think we can play a role in helping reduce some of this. We rely a lot on Jack and his people when we have other issues with right-of-way. So it's not just a closed environment of conversation. We rely on APD, we rely on AFD, because they get called into some of these situations where we're not going to go in, but we may need a medic. So it's a pretty big deal, but I think we're all trying to figure out how to come up with more solutions than just more problems. So I give credit to a lot of people trying to work on this in a big picture sense.
Mr. Dunbar.
So just a follow-up question on that, and this perhaps a question for the chief or for you, Jack, or for the municipal prosecutor, but I assume that most of the people who are staying in our parks, certainly the ones that are camping, are judgment-proof in the sense that they have no financial assets to pay a citation. So I'm curious what effect citing someone like that has. Can it lead to an arrest, or is it what practically is the effect of ticketing someone who has no monetary resources at all?
I don't have the answer to that.
Yeah, sure. For the record, Sunny Medina, City Prosecutor. One is I don't necessarily agree that all those folks are judgment proof. There certainly have fewer resources, but there are ways in which through PFD or through other resources, the city can in fact enforce financially judgments. But to the extent that somebody is, really the goal of citation, I think, is twofold. One is to effectively communicate to the person that their conduct is in violation of municipal code, and that we are taking that seriously for sending that message. And second is the citation for the code can help support a trespass notice or follow-up trespass arrest down the road. And what Mr. Rod is speaking to that we've been working on for a while now is a formalized program that provides for a trespass system throughout Anchorage parks, and it would rely in part on those kinds of citations.
This is something I should know, but the Town Square Park, is it closed at night technically? It's just an open area, but.
Technically, parks are closed from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. That's in code.
So somebody sleeping in the park at night can be moved along, they have no.
Yes, to move along.
It's just a matter of resources to get.
That's really what it comes down to.
Mr. Jones, a very quick follow-up then. For people that are walking at night on Friday or Saturday night through the park to get, say, from Bernie's to down, are they technically trespassing when they walk through it?
You have a transient aspect to this whole thing. It's a thoroughfare. There's connectors between 5th and 6th Avenue, East Beach side, our center. Not uncommon. What's become common is, unfortunately, is that people would like to do that, find a way around. Of course, that's part of it.
Questions? Oh, Mr. Steele, last
Okay,
time.
a quick comment. I know I did ride along some time ago now. APD was really pretty good, or at least the individual I was riding with, really pretty good about if he sees a group of folks that are trespassing on private property, may cause trouble, just basically ask them to move along. But moving along just moves it along, and so it's kind of out of sight, out of mind from the thing over there. It's private property there. If you don't have a place to go, you don't have a place to go.
All right, seeing none, thank you, Chief. Chris, thank you guys for your report. Moving on to the next item, Mr. Kim, is that you back? Yeah, come on up, sir. Have a seat right here, sir. This is, for those who aren't aware, Mr. Kemp is the owner of Quake Brewing Company, Eagle River. As part of the process, he got a brew pub license. There were some concerns raised by Mr. Starr, Eagle River representative, about some of the safety plans and concerns and security issues associated with the new business. He reached out to Mr. Kemp, who has been gracious enough to come and speak to us today. Part of what we approved at the General Assembly member meeting was that this committee would basically sign off on the plans put forward by Mr. Kemp as to how he was going to deal with typical security, sound type of issues. I don't know if everybody's got a copy of it looks like you do, the safety and security plan that Mr. Kemp has provided. I apologize if Ms. Dombowski was supposed to be here today and was, as the Eagle River representative, she was going to kind of lead you through the questions. She's more familiar with the area. But why don't you just give us, start with kind of what your plan is for the business. Give us a little background as to what the business is for those of us that haven't been out there.
Okay.
Tell us what you're planning on doing.
All right. Quake Brewing Company is a brew club with a brew club liquor license and restaurant eating place liquor license attached to it. As to be that way according to Alaska statute. And it's going to be just a nice place for folks to hang out. We're going to brew our own beer, make our own food, as well as serve other local beers as well, Alaskan, and that's going to be the priority moving forward, is go as local as possible and spread out, because we want to try to benefit the local economy as much as we can, not just with providing local fare through our brew pub as a vessel, but also through employment as well. Placing emphasis on veteran employment as a priority. Myself, I know how we do that. I think it's going to be a great place just to enjoy some great food and maybe a safe place. I had a run through recently with APD. I came on May 24th and reviewed the safety, the policy, as well as the location. They had a couple suggestions that I've definitely taken heart. Most of the suggestions were really personal business in nature, sort of like get some security cameras, try to set up controls for employee theft, the possibility of that sort of thing. So I took diligent notes. But overall, their assessment was very good. They thought that we had a very thorough and comprehensive safety and security policy.
Have you had any experience previously with running an operation, a bar, brew pub, any type of similar experience? Or was this your first time?
No, this is my first time.
And you mentioned, sorry.
Oh, well, however, I am bringing on a crew that has loads of experience. So that's one of the things being an officer has taught me, is to build a good team around me.
And you mentioned security cameras, and is that something you have or have plans to have?
I do have plans to have, yes.
Do you know how many cameras you plan on having at this point?
I don't know, but they will be strategically placed to catch, each corner of the location, on the inside and outside. And I'd say about every 6 months, if there are no issues, we'll go ahead and erase it just to make sure we have plenty of data storage space.
How close, when Mr. Starr first raised this issue, you mentioned that there are some residences not too far, I think, behind your building. How close are the nearest residential?
I would say about 200 to 250 feet. I know that was an issue. We do plan on building a wall on the glassy side of the location, so that if we do have an event, that will minimize the amount of noise.
And noticed on your plan too that you plan on ceasing, I guess, music at 10 o'clock on weeknights.
That is true.
And 11 o'clock on weekends.
Yes.
Any other plans for, that you can talk about as far as keeping sort of people from going towards the residential area or becoming a nuisance to those folks?
Well, our policy will be posted publicly for everyone to see. And if we do recognize that someone is, violating, they'll get proper warning, and then if it's not heeded, they will not be able to enter our establishment, period. Not just our establishment, but later on when we begin to franchise the operation, hopefully the point will set in that, Quake Brewing Company is wherever we go, you will never be able to come into.
Is it your property all the way to where the residential property starts, or is that somebody else's property, that 200 or so feet?
My leased space is the interior of the building and just the walkway right outside. Everything else is controlled by Firelight Plaza 2 LLC.
Yeah, I just wonder about relations with the neighbors. It might be a good idea to touch base with them, make sure they know who you are, and so that there is a channel of communication when things go awry, and then it can be solved peacefully rather than have to call out the troops.
Yes, sir. I think that I'm glad you brought that up. I think I've had more people come to me regarding the brew pub and asking when we're going to open because they can't wait. I can't count how many people already, especially the ones that ask me, can we just put a tap line to my house so you can just.
When do you plan on opening?
Right now, renovations are back underway. We're looking at mid-July right now. At least soft opening.
Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sir, we had another alcohol vendor operator about a month ago express to us in a meeting that they basically saw that their responsibility for customers ended at the door. That once they were on the street, personal responsibility, for liability reasons, it was out of their hands. And I was wondering if that is how you view the relationship as well. Is that how you see your sort of relationship to the customers and to the neighborhood?
No, this is my home. I live down the street, and I don't know who that was. It's not past judgment, but that's not the way we're going to operate. Now, I don't want to go too far in people's personal lives, for sure, but as far as that's part of my community, responsibility. If someone is, found that they're too inebriated to drive home, we call them a cab, or put them on the, at least on the bus, and especially if I know them, give their family a call. I see that anything wrong with that. We've been establishing relationships with our neighbors and friends in the area all the time. Like I said, I bought a home here in Eagle River. This is where we're going to be. This is our new home. And I'm going to act like it. Now, as far as the military, you ain't got anything to worry about with that, because I know all the commanders, when they come and go, and I try to establish new relationships with all the commanders and first sergeants, because I know soldiers and service members, and if you drop their commander or first sergeant's name, they'll start to act right real quick. So, and that's all it pretty much takes for them, is getting that relationship. As far as the neighborhood folks go, just getting to know them, and like I said, don't go too far in their personal lives, but do care.
Any other questions for Mr. Kim? For what's worth, Mr. Starr texted me this morning before this meeting and indicated that I guess he had been in contact with you. He thinks you're working very hard to do the right thing, and he said he's very comfortable with your plan. And from what I've heard, so am I. I do appreciate coming here to report. It's a bit of an unusual situation for us, but we're trying to be as proactive as we can with all liquor licenses to try to avoid problems in the front end, as you can see. With that, does anyone have any concerns with respect to Mr. Kemp's operation? I think the thing we passed at the assembly meeting required us to affirmatively okay Mr. Kemp's safety plans. So unless I hear an objection, Ms. Ray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's not an objection, don't worry. I just want to say, thanks for being here and congratulations, and I wish you well in your new business. We welcome entrepreneurs in our community. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Ray Jackson. Seeing no other objections, the record will reflect that the Public Safety Committee heard from Mr. Kemp and approved his security plan, and we do wish you well, and thank you for being here today. All right, moving on. Our reports section. We have Deputy Chief Gilliam here, and you hopefully have this document, which is a very nice black and orange colored document, which is the APD dashboard. Ms. Kelly. If anybody needs something, I stole all the other copies. Just as a means of background, I asked both the APD and AFD to come up with a dashboard of various metrics that can be used by this committee on a month-to-month basis, just to sort of track the things that are measurable, at least, that may be of interest to this committee. They both did a really good job. They do keep a lot of statistics. We tried not to, recreate the wheel or put them to any additional work in order to do this. But I know Captain Dahl from the police department was very helpful. We went through these various statistics. I don't know that these are the magic ones. We have these here for the committee members. If there are other measurements of what the department is doing that you would like to see, we can try to incorporate those if those are things that are captured by the department. But the gist is to give you a sense. It includes not only, at least for the APD one, it includes not only various statistics on arrests and crimes, but also the last page is personnel data. So we know how many officers or how many sworn officers we have, how many in patrol, so we can kind of track that as we work towards building up the department, as well as officers in any kind of specialty units. Hopefully it's informative for you. But with that, Chief, anything you want to add to the report or the process?
Actually, I do. When I got this from our administrative section, I was looking at it and I noticed that you had it by districts, the information, the totals by month, by districts. APD no longer uses the district model. So I got a hold of our data analysis this afternoon or this morning before coming here, and there's going to be a difference in the reporting of these numbers because, for example, in District 1, it reports for January 4,680 calls for service in that area. The problem is District 1, actually, that area contains both the downtown area and part of Mountain View area. So the lines are not clear. So I met with our dispatch and data analysis this morning and asked them to come up with a more relevant mapping and more so that the numbers will actually match the areas that you're getting data for. So the numbers are still mean something. It tells you trends, but it's going to be difficult if someone in your constituent, if you represent Assembly Area 1, you're actually going to be overlapping another area with this data. So I apologize for that. I did not recognize that until I started looking at it this morning. But the good news is that it captures good data. It gives you the ability to look at what's happening citywide to a degree. And then if you look at the second page, it gives you the top 20 types of citations that are issued. And then probably the more important question about is what services or what personnel available for operations. The one thing that I noticed is it tells you that the number of patrol officers is 160, The trouble is that this number does not tell you how many are unavailable. We have people that are out on leave, we have people that are out for FEMLA, or surgeries. So I would like that number to be what's available during this time period as opposed to what we have on staff. I wanted to ask you if that's something you would rather have as to who's actually working out there as opposed to what we have on staff.
Yeah, that was an issue I went over with Captain Dowell, because it was an issue that was very relevant, and I can't remember how we left it, but I guess it was a question of, how is it by day, by month, or how we're gonna calculate that, which is, I think, where the difficulty was, but any way that you think would be relevant to capturing that information would be very helpful.
And I think if we do it by month, it would be better for us if we could say, because you're asking for this on a quarterly basis, correct?
Well, some of the statistics, I think, are quarterly, is how you keep them. Would like to get this report every month. Obviously, you may replicate some of the quarterly data
Okay.
when we get it.
Well, then my suggestion would be, we say, okay, this is the number that are assigned to these positions, that will give you the 160. But during the month of June, we had X number available, May, or, we can tell you that, how many of those are available during that month.
That would be helpful. Mr. Perry, you have a question?
Chief, I'm interested in how many we have on each shift per quarter. For example, Friday I was told, we had 15 officers on shift. That's all they had, for 15 officers for the entire town. I get concerned when I hear just like.
I would be concerned with that as well, and that number seems low to me, and I'm not
Can you
sure.
figure out how to give us a number that just lets us know, because we hear from a lot of constituents.
This question came up in our last staff meeting, and I asked the question, well, why don't we just ship you over on a daily? You can see every shift that we have, you can see the officers assigned to which area, and you can count the numbers, if that way you can get daily information you want.
I like that. Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If it's not too burdensome to you.
Well,
We could break it down between city proper and Eagle River Chugiak, because sometimes our people in Eagle River Chugiak think they're on the short end of available officers.
Well, I can tell you, every time that there's a shortage of, because we have to have 3 out there.
Yeah.
And when we've had incidents where we got a mass incident or something happened, we bring somebody in, I guarantee you, somebody from Eagle River is calling us the next day and saying, how come you took one of my persons from there? And so we try to keep the 3 out there at all times.
Which is more than the hillside, by the way.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chief.
Yeah.
Ms. Gray Jackson, you have a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm noticing, I'm seeing, quite a bit of citations issued, but I don't see any for texting while driving. I'm
Well,
just curious.
That actually was.
I try and bust them, but,
She turns herself in every now and then.
Ms. Gray Jackson through the chair. The texting while driving is now, it's a citation versus a criminal offense. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think that was the beginning of this year that changed? Okay, good. And the reason is it makes it easier for officers to cite that. I don't see that on the list, but I know it happens because I hear the complaints.
And Deputy Chief, I can actually respond to that.
Thank you. Thank you.
There was, Madam Gray Jackson, when that violation went into effect on January 1st, the point assignment through DMV for the offense did not match the severity of the crime. And so APD has been citing for that offense under, when possible, under the careless violation as opposed to the texting while driving violation, while DMV was catching up with the point allocation. Obviously, not every time they observe texting while driving, they could make a careless case out of it, but when they could, that was the recommendation, was to cite specifically that instead for the point issue. Now that the state has passed the same legislation and theirs is reduced to a violation, DMV's next step this summer is to change the point allocation, and so once that's done, APD will be, I think, again, encouraged to cite under the correct statute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Steele and Mr. Dunbar.
I think we passed my question. Just going.
Mr. Dunbar.
Chief, I have a question about the number of sworn officers versus number of patrol officers. On this page, it says we have 363 sworn and 182 patrol. That's less than half, and I was wondering if that ratio is typical for other forces in other cities? Is it typical to have less than half of your sworn officers be patrol officers?
Yes, and the reason is because we actually have 3 divisions in the Anchorage Police Department. We have the patrol division, that's the ones that you see in police cars, and they're going call to call to call. We also have the detective division, and in between, which kind of, they have a specific goal, it's our crime suppression division, and they work both in uniform and out. Sometimes they're in a marked unit and not. So what we do is the staffing that we have for patrol officers, we try to figure out how many patrol officers are necessary to answer the call for service. The goal of the crime suppression division is to try to reduce the numbers of calls for service we have in problem locations or problem individuals. And of course, the detective division will follow up on specific crime-related cases. So the answer is yeah, we try to divide those resources to where we can make the most impact.
Is there a sort of national standard or best practice for what that ratio is?
Yeah, if you go to a command school, they talk about how many people you're supposed to, or how many officers per 100,000 or per 1,000 population. It doesn't work here. We're far below what the national average is.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any questions? Anything further on the dashboard, Chief?
On the dashboard? No, I like this. I don't know why we have black and orange on. I'm going to have to ask about this. I'm thinking Halloween every time I see that.
West High School College.
Oh, here we go. So we do.
And we do consider this a work in progress. We'll refine this
Yeah.
over time. As you think of statistics that would be helpful to us, please feel free to incorporate them or let us know. And if any of the assembly members, committee members have ideas about what they'd like to see, we'll try to make that happen too.
Well, this is my first involvement in this. This has typically come from the administrative side of the division, the department. And just so you know, I don't know if you've got the word, Deputy Chief Spatafor has announced his retirement. He's leaving June 10th.
Oh.
So I'll be coming to someone and ask if we could get some recognition for him because he has served 38 years.
Mr. Trainer.
Chief, you might want to see about adding something related to marijuana as it becomes legal.
Oh, I think that's a good
Good
idea.
to start planning for that now, so we don't try to reinvent the wheel when that date gets here, because we're gonna have some people that don't understand how it works. You know,
True.
thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
You want to go on to your second part here, the Girdwood policing contingency plans?
You have to, sir. I met with the AST this morning, and we had been working on a memorandum of understanding of how we would work with them. Initially, we thought the troopers were going to leave. We were going to have to deal with it. I know that Mr. Halsey and his group are taking the point lead on how to deal with that, and I hadn't had a chance to talk to either of you this morning. The troopers reported to us that said, well, it's back in the Whittier model. There was an attempt where they thought that the troopers were going to be able to work some type of modified system, but that's now off the table. I understand it's back with the governor's office, and the group in Girdwood is trying to push for the Whittier service.
Mr. Trainer.
Whittier Service Chief, that entails just patrolling Girdwood. I've got the concern on the highway that goes down there. Are the troopers simply gonna get down to the way station and it'd be no man's zone between the way station and Girdwood? Is the troopers not gonna enforce that or what?
That is not
There's
my.
like 111 deaths in that area recently.
It is. I travel that highway every summer, and yes. What we're trying to do with AST is work up a model. They're going to try to put some services down there. They understand that their budget could be cut. The last I was told that they may be losing 8 to 12 troopers. And if that's the case, they may only have 1 or 2 troopers that can work that highway section. So they're asking us, if they've got 1 trooper out there and something goes wrong, how quickly can we assist them? And that's what we're trying to work on now.
I'm interested in the impact on our force if in fact we have to augment the state, because then, you know, you guys don't have a lot of police as it is. If you have to spend a lot of your time down that roadway, that's kind of a big impact on the amount of officers to be put on the street and property?
Oh, it would be a direct impact because I would expect, we would pull from the south. So that means the south area is going to lose those officers and we would send more than, it would be 2 or more minimum to a response down there because if it is a serious crime and the trooper needs help, there are communication issues. So we would never send 1, we'd likely send 2 and potentially a 3rd.
Thank you, Chief.
Mr. Steele.
If they're going to cut personnel, is there an opportunity for us to pick up some experience with traffic people?
The traffic people, I'm not sure if, or troopers.
Whatever, yeah.
It's a good question. In fact, we've already stole 2. And I was told this morning that we may get others.
Any questions for the Chief? Thank you, Chief. I do want to announce that this committee is certainly more formal than the homelessness committee because they would be all eating the pizza and nobody here is eating the pizza. Just point that out. You're a little uncomfortable about that, but it's not that unusual. I also want to point out that Ms. Novosky is present and being uncharacteristically shy, staying in the back. But she is here. She can't speak, apparently. Oh, you have a question? Yes, Ms. Novosky.
For the chief, may I?
Sure, look, you're.
Chief Gillum, I have spent an enormous amount of time, unusual amount of time over the weekend on the phone with people from Eagle River. I had one senior citizen today call me saying that on Memorial Day around 11 o'clock, there was APD stationed at Snowmobile Drive in Eagle River, and they were doing some sort of speed trap, something, I don't know what they were doing. But he felt they were chasing people, I use that in quotes, into the Fred Meyer parking lot. At one point, he said he watched an APD officer on that stretch going into Fred Meyer, driving very fast. And he said it made him and his wife fearful. So maybe offline you can look into that and give me some information about what in fact was going on in Eagle River that day, how many tickets were issued, those types of things, because he said he had never seen APD acting so aggressively in Eagle River and it concerned him. But that was the third phone call I received between yesterday and today about it. So.
Do you have the name?
And he didn't get a ticket either. He was not one that got a ticket. But I'll give you his name and stuff offline because I don't think he wants it on the record. But
Okay.
he was very upset.
I'll be happy to follow up on that for you.
Thank you.
Moving on, code enforcement. Mr. Frost.
We don't have a dashboard report, but we'll be happy to formulate one. I've already had some, what I'd like to do, just briefly, if I may, is to let the committee know how we're configured, what we actually do, just very briefly, and what the numbers are so far this year. Code enforcement has 2 sections. One's land use enforcement. We primarily enforce zoning laws, Title 21, and also Title 15, the housing. Additionally, we support the municipal clerk's office in Title 10, towing enforcement, and roving vendors are coming up. And then again, the marijuana regulations as they come forward. We have 7, both the sections. Second section is the right-of-way enforcement. Both sections have 7 inspectors. They're configured in a lead inspector, and then 6 are assigned to geographical areas. We base the geographical areas based on usually on the number of cases, trying to even it out. So the hillside, Trinity Arm may have less complaints, and then Government Hill, et cetera, may have more concentration of them. In the land use enforcement area so far, we've had this year about a little less than 1,000 either inspections or complaints and cases, and I'll be happy to put together, like I say, a dashboard to report those monthly. In the right-of-way arena, they have a lot more inspections to do with construction inspection, that sort of thing. They're up around 2,200 already this year. We have performance measures for everything we do. For instance, service requests, we respond within the initial response within 1 business day. And an initial response may be, it's the first positive action taken. Doesn't mean you necessarily visit the property. Typically, we'll review the case, maybe talk to the complainant, and send what we call an informational or friendly letter out that basically says, we have a complaint, and within approximately 10 days, we'll conduct a site visit to see if it's valid or it's not. What we find is 75 to 85% of those either have cleaned up or were non-existent to start with, so then we can triage it down and focus on the ones that are real. In the right-of-way arena this year, so far, it looks like construction is going to be a little bit slower, but we can track that also. But we make sure everything we do, we report quarterly, annually, et cetera, and we stay up around the 95 to 100% range in effectiveness so far, so it's been that way for quite a few years. And what I want to actually also do is thank we have excellent support from the administration, from the assembly, from the other departments. We have excellent communication. And I know it's a pair of challenges, but everybody works together, we get it done.
Mr. Chairman.
Do you have all the staff you need currently to do your job, or do we need?
We have too many resources, not enough work.
I want your job.
I'm sorry, I got those switched. So far, yes. Yeah, right now, I'm trying to get a handle on that because without going into way too much, there are a couple other distractors that we, in land use enforcement, for instance, under previous administration, the code enforcement hotline still exists, but it used to be answered by another division in one community development department. For whatever reason, those duties were taken from them and assigned to us. So I lose an officer a day answering the code enforcement hotline, which is important, and we're not going to let it fall. But then that takes a position away. Zoning plan review with the building permit process, our officers also backfill those positions. So the people that actually take in a building permit process, whether commercial, residential, do the complete plan review from the zoning perspective. If they have pre-construction meetings with contractors, developers, et cetera, so while they're gone, somebody has to cover the counter and do the walk-ins. So there are challenges there. Currently, the short answer should have been, yes, we do. But looking forward, I'm not sure the sustainability, and I'm also not sure, as is anyone, what the impact on the marijuana ordinances is truly going to be. We have an idea, but until it actually hits, we're not going to know. But right now, yes, we have.
We can help you at all,
Yeah.
because sometimes we just need to get involved and make sure that manpower is moved to where it needs to be. Because I want to make sure when this marijuana bulge hits, you guys have the staff to go enforce it. Because I've got no faith in all the state of Alaska enforcing that or anything else.
Right.
Given the fact that $4 billion broken digging deeper ditch every day. So thank you, Tom.
Thank you for the support.
Yeah, I just want to give you an attaboy. You've always been very responsive to whatever comes up in West Anchorage. And we have our share of icy issues and stuff. But you've always done it with a smile. This one, I could see your face, your machine, and get things done.
Well, we've got a lot of really good folks that work hard, and I'll pass it on. Thank you.
Mr. Rizak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to echo Mr. Steele's comments. We really appreciate everything that you do on behalf of our constituents. We really appreciate it. And I wanted to say that publicly, and also that I'm really glad you're on probation.
Well, thank you.
It's an ongoing joke we have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I think that's a great idea to if we can get a dashboard from you as well. I don't want to stretch your resources even further to make that happen. But if there's a way we can get some relevant statistics that you think would show the community what your group is doing, that would be great.
We report them quarterly anyways. No, it's easy. I just have to put them in format.
Well, when we touch base before our next meeting, and we can work on the details of that. And if anybody has any specific items of information they would like to code enforcement, we can see if we can work that in, so coordinate that.
Okay.
Thanks a lot. Was that it for you?
Yes, sir.
Fire Chief Lamont.
I'm going to pass out an updated dashboard. I think I have. Of course, you realize the biggest threat that the fire department faces right now is wildland fires. But we've had tremendous cooperation with Division of Forestry. For example, the fire out of Eagle River on the 27th was a supreme example of state of readiness of both the Anchorage Fire Department, Anchorage Police Department, and Division of Forestry. That fire could have taken off up Eagle River Valley had the winds been blowing that way. But Air Attack, the tanker, Gannett crews and Pioneer Peak crews were there literally on scene almost immediately. So that's the big news at the department. The rest of it on this scorecard, you're going to see, it's pretty evident if you look at the very top. Fire is 2% of what we do. We are a fire department that is EMS heavy, and you can see the EMS is 70%, and it's probably actually a little bit higher than that. But 70% of what we do is EMS. 2% of what we do is actually fighting structure fires. But of course, it's like a parking lot at a mall. You have to have a very large parking lot for Christmas. We have to have a very ready state of equipment and personnel, because when the structure fire hits, you've got to hit that. But the statistics on top will kind of show you where we are most of the time, and most of the time, again, it's in the emergency medical services. The center section is calls by response area, not necessarily the same as by stations, because you'll see there's a station 1 and a station 2. Those call areas are both located at headquarters, station 1. And for whatever reason, a mysterious station 13 has appeared on this sheet. That's obviously some overflow data that got picked up and needs to be reallocated. But you can see again, rescue and EMS, 8,000 calls through the first 4 months of a total of 11. So it's perfectly consistent. Well, it's the same total, but you'll see 27% of the business is done in Station 1. And that's the reason why, working with the union, we were able to add BLS 81 and BLS 82 about a month ago. And I'm happy to report that after 1 month's worth of data, the top 5 stations are now operating at almost identical utilization, about 30%. And before, all of the heavy lifting was occurring at Station 1, when we only had the full-time medic unit, Medic 1. We were staffing Medic 2 with overtime and burning out paramedics and burning out firefighters. So we did add these 2 additional ambulances. We pulled them out of the reserve fleet, and we're working on a program to come back next year during the bond election to fully staff 2 additional ambulances, so we can preserve what we're doing right now with the temporary agreement for 366 days with the union to call for staffing. Operations staff, those numbers in the lower left corner will total up to 346. I should have put that total there. But you can see dispatchers, lead dispatchers, firefighters, paramedics. You'll note that we have 58 paramedics, engineers, captains, etc. And then sort of in the middle on the bottom, you've got the station daily staffing. Of course, Station 1 is indicated by the call volume. That has 20 people there at all times. And the least amount of people at any one station is Station 15, down in the the Discovery area. And then I've highlighted some just recent highlights. Makes sense. First one is the wildland threat is real. We had significant fires on May 14th, May 27th, and May 29th. Just statistically, we actually had 1 back in January. We had 2 in April, and then May we had 7, and we had 1 small one this morning. So very, very concerned, but again, we're at the highest state of readiness we can be. We respond right now with first in engine company going code red to any calls for smoke in the area. We just We're just not gonna take our time to get there. We were gonna treat everything as a potential real fire. We started the Fire Academy on March 29th with 23 candidates. We have lost 5 for a host of reasons, but we've got 18 in the academy right now, and graduation is 1 month from today, July 1st. Hopefully we'll keep the rest of the folks. Home defensible space inspections have been skyrocketing. You know, the tragedy at Fort McMurray was a wake-up call to a lot of people. So as tragic as that fire was, it's actually beneficial for us here in Anchorage because people know how serious that could be. And they're asking, and we're getting out and conducting these defensible space inspections by the schools as we speak. We still have the complete burn ban. We probably won't lift that for the foreseeable future. We actually thought about increasing the ban for all fires, even those contained in chimeneas, et cetera, this past Memorial Day weekend. But the humidity was up and the winds weren't predicted to be high, so we left it just as it stands today. We've brought on a couple of additional people, just minor staffing improvements. Of course, we have the additional inspector that the assembly approved. That'll be going forward shortly. We hired a new mechanic. I'll be hiring another IT specialist. And we've given up a couple of command positions so that we can hire worker bees, if you will. That's where the need is greatest. Have a lot of intercoordination meetings going with the Matsu Borough, Ted Stevens International Airport, and Jay Bear. We're all locked at the hip. Had some great lessons learned, discussions about the Sockeye fire last year. We're going through with APD the upgrade of our dispatch, computer-aided dispatch systems. That's going well. And Station 3, I'm heading over to Station 3. New Station 3, I've got a meeting there at 1 o'clock. That's just about move-in ready. They don't have the beds yet, so the crews would have to be sleeping on mattresses on the floor. But that station will open probably within the next couple of weeks. In New Station 9, down on Lake Otis, off of the Yarmouth, that's progressing well. They've got some parts for the tower that are going to be delayed, so we're looking at about early August opening for that station. And then, as I noted, that last comment, the 2 BLS ambulances that have been added, that has been tremendously successful. And we're rotating in people from the slower stations to staff those rigs. And a person would come in about every 54 calendar days to ride those ambulances. And the folks coming in love it. They like the opportunity to interact with the folks downtown, and they also like the difference in the call. So it's really been a tremendously successful program.
Mr. Jackson and then Mr. Train.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And you may have addressed my question already, and even just missed it, but what exactly is a good lieutenant call?
Let's see, a good example. Somebody smells smoke in their house, and somebody is on the second floor, they smell the smoke, they call 911, and somebody else was down in the kitchen cooking, and they had some smoke from the cooking. The person cooking knew exactly what was going on. There was no risk, there was no danger. The second person didn't know that, and so it was a good intention call. They thought there was a problem, there really wasn't.
So if I can follow, Mr. Chairman, so would a carbon dioxide think there's a problem with, is that also?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank
Somebody's
you.
batteries are low and the CO detector is plunking away, and we'll go in and pull out the battery, put it in a new one, and good intent call.
Thanks. I experienced that about 5 years ago. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Train and Mr. Dunlap.
Chief, I got a question for you as it relates to fires and homeless camps. I was told every now and then what they're finding is copper wire. They're melting the plastic off of it. where they turn in to recycle it for money. Are you finding that in the fires?
In the homeless camp fires, absolutely. In fact, the fire behind the permit center on May 14th, you walk through those camps and just piles of copper wire. And it's that real narrow gauge. I can't imagine how many feet of that wire you'd have to burn to get any appreciable dollars. But yes, it's like a big spaghetti in all the homeless camps.
Chief Gilliam, as we're working on our second-hand ordinance, one of the areas we want to deal with was recycled copper. Can we put something in there that they cannot buy copper that's obviously been burned? And I don't know how we can equate that, but there has to be a way to tell them, you see copper coming in that's black, it was done maliciously. I'm trying to figure out some way to stop from going into those places and being turned into money.
Mr. Trainee, through the chair, I believe the solution is where we're working at, is requiring people to register and get back to that, because once you take away that ability to get cash for something, they're going to go somewhere else. I mean, right now it's profitable for them. When you take that ability away to gain money from that, they'll go somewhere else.
Of course, one of the real challenges, Mr. Trainee, is burning that plastic gives off really poisonous
I know we
gases.
had a firm and I'm told I had cancer because of breathing it at some point.
And when we fight a structure fire, we go in with a self-contained breathing apparatus, the tanks and the masks. When we're fighting wildland fires, we don't wear those. So if you're in a camp, you're breathing that stuff. It's not good.
And we will have a report from Mr. Sherwood, I believe, at our next meeting on that.
Because I'm interested in that ordinance on the field.
He's working on it, and I believe he'll have it ready for us at the next meeting. Mr. Dunbar and Mr. Steele, and we'll have to be pretty quick because the pizza's getting cold.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a pretty early and basic question, but is there any portion of the municipality that's outside the fire department service area or doesn't pay the general taxes for the fire department?
Yes.
And aside from J-Bear, what happens when there's a wildland fire in that part of the municipality?
We will respond. If it's a wildland fire, we will respond, and the people paying into the Anchorage Fire Service area bear that expense.
So there are parts of the municipality that will get the service but don't pay taxes for it?
Correct.
Is there any kind of billing system after the fact?
Well, there's nobody to bill in the wildland. We're not gonna bill the BLM but if you turn that into a structure fire for people who live outside of the Anchorage Fire Service area, and there are a number of areas within the city where that applies, we have a rate schedule of dollars per hour per apparatus.
But just to be clear, if their land is not BLM land, not J-Bear land, that is outside of our service area, where we are engaging in stopping it from getting to a neighborhood, for example.
Right.
And that area is not paying taxes for that.
Could possibly be, yes.
Quickly, Mr. Steele, Mr. Bosky, and Mr.
Yeah, I was just
Trainee,
gonna say.
very quickly.
Very quickly. I was just gonna say that, I knew reputable electricians who tear stuff out or have scrap, and once every few months or something, they'll burn it off, take it in, and make a couple bucks out here or that. You wouldn't want to just out.
Mr. Bosky. Mr. Trainee.
Of course, it's not just fire, it's also Parks and Rec. We have 341 personal land on the side that don't pay for Parks and Rec, they get to use Parks and Rec. Because we get unified, in borough and city, those portions don't come in Parks and Rec. So it's a bunch of different things across this town that are just not the way they should be. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would be remiss to say that we have to remember Chugiak and Birdwood both have volunteer fire departments, and we pay area-wide EMS. Our fire is obviously reduced because we have volunteer departments, but I would caution people to say that people in Chugiak and Birdwood don't pay for fire. It might be a reduced rate. We you also have to remember, Chugiak doesn't charge Anchorage Mutual Aid when they come into Eagle River and back them up, and vice versa. I mean, sometimes there are charges to go, but when Chugiak, we have a fully staffed, couple hundred members on the Chugiak Volunteer Fire Department. I don't know how many Girdwood has, but we have fully functional, capable and confident volunteer fire departments within the municipality of Anchorage. So just because we don't pay full service AFP for fire service, we do pay for our volunteer service. And they do have the same relationships with BLM as does the Anchorage Fire Department.
And just to be clear, my response was not, I wasn't even considering the Girdwood and Chugiak fire departments when I made my response.
Well, I
because
think it's helpful.
Because
Yeah.
they do exactly what you said they do.
Yeah, I think it's helpful for the newer members to realize that even though somebody might be out of the Anchorage Fire Service area, it doesn't mean they're not paying something for fire. And they also have their own departments that cover those areas.
Absolutely.
Let's move on to the health department. Ms. Freeman, if you could be quick with this.
I will be extremely quick. Thank you, Chief. We have increased our partnership relationships related to addressing homelessness. We, of course, are very active in working with a homeless coordinator for the municipality. And the demonstration of that is that we have, of course, supported and will implement where it is required the increase in staffing at the Brother Francis shelter. We are working actively in the public health domain related to that, whether it's medical services at Brother Francis to reduce calls to AFD. So we're working with our Native Health partners in that effort. We also will begin providing case management services at the Lusac Library related to patrons who clearly need additional assistance. This is both to protect the safety of the other patrons, children and adults, as well as the individuals who are considered vulnerable and probably produce a lot of calls to AFD and APD. That will begin in August, and then we are currently providing additional services through our Aging and Disability Resource Center at the library. We are beginning a partnership with the state of Alaska to initiate the marijuana educational efforts. They already have funding and funding allocation for that effort, so we don't want to reinvent the wheel, and we'll partner with the state of Alaska to begin that process of educating the public on marijuana use, safe and otherwise. We are also working extensively with our legal department, thank you, Bill, and your team, on our child care licensing code changes, our food sanitation code changes, and our air quality code changes, so we'll keep you informed of that. We are working with EOC on moving forward with the mass pet care plan in case of an emergency. We are in our 6th month working relationship with Gold Belt Securities on the administration and the operation of the Anchorage Safety Patrol Safety Center. They have been an outstanding partner, outstanding service provider, and so we'll keep you posted on that. We will be renewing their contract. They expressed an interest in that, and we are looking forward to the continuation of that contract. And I think those are the highlights.
Seeing none, thank you. Office of Emergency Management, as if it was an emergency.
Yeah, nice stuff.
First
Yeah,
and
real-
last step.
Yeah, real simple stuff. We did have we were talking about the wildfire on Friday. We did get a call, and we were preparing to ramp up the EOC if required. Kept in close contact with Eric Schumann, Captain Schumann, about the direction of fire. And if we did, we were going to have to go into our evacuation plan. But we were already set. We already had people start to ramp that up. So that worked out really well. It did happen. And then we're looking at our protocol with talked today with the Red Cross about notification. They'd like to be a little further into the loop, and that's fine. We can do that. And we're continuing building our visiting local churches, saying who wants to be on the shelter. We sent out a notification a while back, a letter. Not as good as responses from mine, so we're resending that out. Touching base with all of them. Other than that, that's about it.
Any questions? Seeing none, that brings us to the end of the agenda. Are there any member comments? Like 2 minutes, any audience comments, anybody? Okay, Just in closing, I just want to say that, obviously there's a lot of dashboards, kind of a new thing here. It's not like that we believe that all of these departments can be completely measured by statistics and metrics. It's just a tool that they deal with a lot of things that go beyond this kind of neat measurement. But as we go along and continue to refine this, I think it will give us a pretty good sense of, at least statistically, what's happening with departments, and hopefully we can keep that up. That is it. Enjoy some pizza.
Thank you.